You want to know what the heartbeat of a major airline really looks like? It isn't the glossy magazine ads with champagne-soaked first-class cabins. It isn't the smug Instagram posts from pilots with Ray-Bans and perfect hair. No. The real heartbeat lives in a basement-level control center beneath Horizon Jet Airways. A bunker that smells like burnt coffee, overheating servers, and a kind of existential dread you can't put into words. It looks like me, Esme Pierce, age 41, leaning over a wall of monitors at 3:45 in the morning, sipping a cup of coffee that tastes like someone filtered it through a radiator. For 14 years. I've been Horizon Jet's Senior Systems Flow Architect, which is a fancy way of saying I'm the one who stops this airline from accidentally crashing itself into financial ruin every sunrise. I orchestrate everything: gate rotations, airspace paths, crew time compliance, ground delay programs, you name it. And our internal system, Skytrace, is a malfunctioning cryptid held together with duct tape, legacy code, and whatever small scrap of sanity I have left. Only I understand how to keep it from cannibalizing itself. This morning was like every other: alarms chirping, servers humming, weather alerts screaming at me from the southeast corridor, a cargo jet stuck in Denver, and one fatigued captain demanding a reassignment before his duty clock ran out. I was a goddess of organized chaos. 30 minutes in, I had resequenced 5 flights, diverted 1, manually rebuilt the Detroit ground delay matrix, and bribed a gate supervisor with an extra break to unblock a frozen crew rotation. Then, like a low-budget perfume, admixed with entitlement and bad decisions. The door swung open. Cole Renford, the CEO's son and our newly self-appointed Chief Transformation Officer, strutted in with his fiancée Marina Vale in tow. Marina, an ex-lifestyle influencer turned aerospace visionary, held a pastel pink tablet like it was divine scripture. The temperature dropped 10 degrees. Even the servers seemed afraid. "Esme," Cole said, syrupy sweet. "We need to talk about your outdated methods." I didn't know it yet, but that sentence was the first domino, the beginning of the end, the spark that would eventually shut down every one of their planes at dawn. "I hope you're doing okay today, really. Life gets heavy sometimes, and if you've been carrying too much lately, I hope this moment gives you a little calm. If you can, try stepping outside for just 1 minute later and let your eyes rest on something far away: a horizon, a rooftop, a tree. It's a tiny reset, but it works wonders. Where are you listening from right now? I love hearing where everyone's tuning in, and if this story is keeping you company, feel free to subscribe. It helps more than you know. All right, let's get back to what happened next. Cole Renford leaned against the glass wall like he owned the oxygen in the room. Marina stood beside him, smiling that overly whitened, camera-ready smile that made my eye twitch. She looked like she rehearsed empathy in front of a ring light. "Your methods are..." "What's the phrase?" Cole squinted dramatically. "Analog," Marina chirped, like charming, but super outdated. Kind of like vinyl records, but for airplanes. I blinked at her. Skytrace isn't vinyl. It's a nuclear reactor made of code, written by a programmer who probably smoked through every update. Cole ignored me. He stepped closer, tapping my main console with a perfectly manicured finger. A cardinal sin. Touching my console without permission was like licking a live wire coated in aviation regulations. I slapped his hand away before my brain caught up. He gasped like I had committed a war crime. "You can't touch the routing lattice when it's running a live recalibration," I said sharply. "You'll corrupt the handoff sequence." Marina's smile faltered. "See that tone? That's exactly what we meant by resistance to modernization." I stared at them, suddenly understanding. This wasn't a visit. This was reconnaissance. They weren't here to streamline operations. They were here to assess how replaceable I was. Cole gave a smug nod toward my screens. "Marina and I have been studying the system. Actually, she has a few ideas for improvement." Oh no. Here it comes. Marina stepped forward, tapping her pastel tablet. "We think flights should be grouped by color, like red for storms, blue for smooth skies, Green for that's weather radar. The system already displays that on the right-hand interface. Oh, she frowned. Well, then maybe flights should be sorted by vibes. I swear one of the servers groaned. Cole cleared his throat. Dad wants us to transform HorizonJet into a modern, intuitive airline. That means less dependence on individual expertise. There it was, the bullet, fired straight into my 14-year career without remorse. Cole was smiling when he said it. That made it worse. He leaned over my shoulder like a CEO in a bad drama. Esme, we're thinking of transitioning operations into a new AI-led model, with Marina overseeing user experience. I pictured thousands of passengers stranded because Marina thought an aircraft needed better vibes. AI can support routing, I said evenly, but it can't replace manual logic during high-traffic windows. Skytrace isn't just code, it's a living network. You don't understand its patterns yet. Marina tilted her head. See, that's the problem. You act like the system is yours. It is. I said before I could stop myself, or at least, it has been every time it tried to kill itself. Cole straightened. Offended. We'll discuss your role at noon. Boardroom. Mandatory. They walked out without waiting for my response. A perfumed cloud of rosemary bergamot nonsense lingered behind them. My supervisor, Jonah Price, shuffled over once they were gone. Jonah had the posture of a deflated accordion and the heart of a saint. You okay? No? I admitted quietly. But I will be. Because in that moment, staring at the empty doorway, listening to the server fans whine like nervous animals I knew, I could feel it in my bones, the way a pilot senses turbulence before it hits. They were planning to fire me, and they had no idea what Skytrace would do without me. Jonah, I said softly, you might want to update your resume. His eyes widened. What's happening? The beginning, I said. Of something very stupid, and very soon, very costly. The boardroom at HorizonJet was a glass-walled aquarium where executives pretended to think big thoughts while staring down at the mechanics working themselves to the bone. Walking into that room always felt like entering a reality show where the stakes were low for them and catastrophic for the rest of us. At 12 o'clock sharp, I stepped inside. Cole Renford sat at the head of the long steel table like a prince awaiting coronation. Marina occupied the seat next to him, legs crossed, tablet glowing like a holy artifact. Around them were 7 department heads, each wearing identical expressions, fear mixed with a pinch of resignation. The only person missing was Elias Renford, CEO of HorizonJet, also known as Cole's father. That was my first warning sign. Elias never missed operational meetings. If he wasn't here, it meant one thing: the children were driving the car now. Esme, Cole said, spreading his arms as if welcoming a pilgrim. Take a seat. I stayed standing. Cole's smirk tightened. Marina glanced at him with a look that said, she's already being difficult. He tapped his tablet. The lights dimmed. A presentation appeared on the wall. The first slide read, HorizonJet 2.0, a new era. Whenever an airline uses the phrase new era, what they mean is, we're about to ruin everything that works. Cole launched into his speech. HorizonJet has relied too heavily on legacy systems and outdated talent structures. He gestured toward me without looking. We can't keep depending on individual experts who bottleneck innovation. I raised an eyebrow. You mean experts who prevent the planes from crashing? Several heads around the table twitched. But no one dared intervene. Marina clicked to the next slide, a colorful graphic that resembled a mood board for a skincare brand. Not a multi-million-dollar airline. We want Skytrace to become more intuitive. She chirped. Something that anyone can use, like a smartphone app. Clean, playful, friendly. It's a live aviation routing matrix. I said dryly. Not Duolingo. Ignoring me. She continued. We've mapped the entire system, and we don't see why operations need such complicated access. If we streamline user permissions, we eliminate inefficiencies. Streamline. There was that cursed word again. Cole clasped his hands dramatically. Which brings us to the primary purpose of this meeting, restructuring. The word hung in the air like smoke. Jonah shot me a horrified glance from across the table. His hand trembled slightly as he clicked his pen, a nervous tic he'd developed during the pandemic scheduling meltdown. I kept my expression neutral. I'd been waiting for this. Cole leaned forward, elbows on the table. We've hired outside consultants to modernize Skytrace. They say the system is overbuilt and overly dependent on your personal touch. My personal touch, I repeated, is the reason your aircraft haven't been sitting on runways for 48 hours straight. Cole ignored the jab. We're instituting a new AI-driven operating model. Marina will oversee user workflow design, and we believe based on best practices that your role has become redundant. There it was. The bullet, fired cleanly and confidently. A few executives winced, but their silence said everything. They were scared. Scared of losing their jobs. Scared of challenging the air. Scared of saying the truth out loud. I stood still, letting the words settle like dust after an explosion. Then I exhaled once. Slowly, Cole, I said, voice even. Skytrace is not plug and play. It's held together with manual logic, real-time overrides, and custom routing algorithms that you don't even know exist. That's why the consultants are here, Marina said brightly. They'll figure it out. No, I said, they won't. Cole scoffed. Esme, you're overestimating your importance. This company survived before you, and it'll survive after, not with Skytrace in its current state. I replied, but go ahead, modernize it. I'm sure the system will behave beautifully without the person who's been stabilizing it for more than a decade. Cole stood abruptly, palms flat on the table. Esme Pierce, you are dismissed from this project effective immediately. You'll transition your duties by end of day. There it was, the beginning of the end. I glanced at the glass wall behind him, where ground crew were loading cargo real workers doing real jobs, while the children of privilege played with their livelihoods like toys. I turned back to Cole. All right, I said softly. If you want to take the controls, I'll let go. He smiled, believing he'd won. But Skytrace never behaved well for people who treated it like a toy. And Cole had just fired the only pilot who knew how to land the technological plane he was hijacking. There was something in the back that no one expected. I walked out of the boardroom with the calm, steady steps of a surgeon leaving an operating room, not because the patient lived, but because I had already accepted they wouldn't. Behind me, Cole was still talking, feeding the room another hollow sentence about workflow synergy. Marina nodded along like a bobblehead influencer who thought spreadsheets were a form of emotional abuse, but the moment the boardroom door shut, something inside me clicked. Resolve. Cold. Precise. Frighteningly clear resolve. Jonah caught up to me halfway down the hall. What did they say? His voice cracked like he already knew the answer. I didn't sugarcoat it. They're pushing me out. Slowly enough to blame the process, but fast enough to pretend it's progress. His face paled. Esme, they can't run Skytrace without you. They barely understand the login tree. That's not my problem anymore, I said, though the truth hummed beneath the words. It was absolutely still my problem until I chose otherwise. He ran a hand through his thinning hair. Should I be worried? Yes, I said gently. Update your resume tonight. And Jonah, clear your personal files off the server before they lock you out. He nodded, throat tight. I watched him disappear into the operations center, like a man returning to a collapsing building to salvage what he could. My chest tightened. These people weren't the problem. It was leadership, or the cosplay version of leadership Cole and Marina practiced back in the OCC. The screens glowed with the comforting, chaotic tapestry I'd tamed for 14 years. Weather bands sweeping across the Midwest. Load factors recalculating in real time. Crew duty clocks whispering silent warnings. Planes crossing digital skies like fireflies. This was my universe. My code. My life's work. And now two amateurs were pummeling at it with pastel tablets and ego-driven buzzwords. I sat down and flexed my fingers. All right. Skytrace, I murmured. If they want to drive, we need to make sure they understand exactly what that means. Skytrace hummed back the familiar whir of strained processors, old wiring, and my custom logic pulsing through it like a second nervous system. Because here's the truth, no one outside ops understands modern airline software isn't a machine. It's a creature, temperamental, moody, loyal only to the person who speaks its language, and nobody spoke its language better, or at all, except me. I opened my personal admin console. A window popped up, user authority root, extended, last override, ERO2, 14M active routing patches, 132. My code, my scripts formed the hidden scaffolding, holding everything together. It wasn't sabotage. It wasn't malicious. It was survival. It was years of compensating for outdated architecture and corporate apathy. Without me, the airline would still function, for a while, but eventually a misread data stream, a corrupted routing cache, a broken handoff between arrival and departure layers, and the entire system would seize like a locked engine midair. I selected each custom module, one by one, migrating them from the open operational layer into a private, encrypted directory attached to my credentials, a safety measure, nothing more. And absolutely compliant with the workflow IP clause HR forgot existed. Once the transfer completed, Skytrace blinked, a brief stutter of uncertainty. You'll be fine, I whispered. Just quieter. I shut down the console. Not deleted, not damaged, just no longer universally accessible. And when Cole removed me when my credentials disappeared, so would every invisible bridge that kept the system from drowning. I stood to leave. Skytrace whirred behind me, like a creature holding its breath. As I reached the stairs, I felt a strange calm settle over me. This wasn't revenge, not yet. This was inevitability, because if Cole wanted to take control of an aircraft, he didn't understand. Sooner or later, dawn would come, and he would learn the hard way what happens when you fire the only person who knows where the controls actually are. This paragraph explains everything you are about to hear. By the time my shift ended, the sun had dipped behind the maintenance hangars, leaving long shadows stretched across the tarmac like dark warnings. I packed slowly, too slowly for anyone who didn't know what was happening. But I wasn't stalling. I was savoring. 14 years of saving this airline from itself. 14 years of patching holes, rewriting broken logic, covering for executives who didn't know a flight deck from a dishwasher. And tomorrow, they'd pretend none of it mattered. I slipped my access badge into my bag. It felt heavier than plastic had a right to be. As I headed toward the exit, I nearly bumped into Ilias Renford, the real CEO, the father, the man who built Horizon Jet from 3 outdated regional jets and an enormous gamble. He looked tired, older than I remembered. The lines in his face were carved deep, like someone had etched stress into his skin. "Esme," he said, stopping me with a hand on my arm. "I heard there was tension today." "Tension? Sure, let's call it that. I got your son's message loud and clear," I replied. "He wants progress. I'm in his way." A shadow passed across Elias's expression. He sighed, rubbing his temple. "Cole's enthusiastic. He wants to modernize, but he doesn't always understand what keeps the engine running. Skytrace isn't an engine." I said, "It's an ecosystem. Remove the wrong branch and the whole forest collapses." Elias nodded slowly. "I know. I've always trusted your instincts." "Then why weren't you in the boardroom? Why did you let him run it?" But I swallowed the words. Elias wasn't the villain. Not really. He was just a tired man who had stepped back a moment too early. A father who didn't realize the cost of letting his son play executive dress-up. "Esme," he said quietly, "just don't make any sudden moves. Let me handle Cole." I'll straighten things out. There was a time years ago when that promise would have meant something, but that time was gone, and we both knew it. I appreciate it. I said, a polite lie. Have a good night. Elias. You too, he replied, though it sounded like a wish rather than a certainty. I walked out into the evening air. Cool, still. A silent sky trace never allowed me. I didn't go home, not yet. Instead, I crossed the employee parking lot and followed the narrow path leading toward the fringe of the airfield. From here, you could see everything: runway lights blinking awake, ground crew moving like ants beneath the belly of a late-night departure, the orange glow of a fueling truck rolling toward Gate 12. This place had been my second heartbeat for more than a decade. Leaving it felt like stepping out of my own skin. My phone buzzed. A text from Jonah. You leaving for real? They can't do this without you. I typed back. They think they can. Let them learn. He replied instantly. Should I be scared? I stared at the blinking cursor. Should he? Maybe not now, but soon. Just be ready. Tomorrow might be rough. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and looked up at the night sky, the real one. Not the pixelated version I'd spent years fixing and manipulating inside Skytrace. For the first time in ages, I felt absolutely nothing tethering me to this place. Not loyalty, not fear, not duty, only clarity. Cole believed the system would obey him the way it obeyed me. He thought Skytrace was buttons and dashboards and sleek presentations. He had no idea it was an animal one that recognized its handler. And tomorrow morning, when my credentials were revoked and the system searched for the logic only I had ever kept alive, the creature would finally lift its head and show its teeth. I turned away from the runway lights, exhaled a single calm breath, and walked toward my car. The storm hadn't begun yet, but the air already tasted like lightning. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was anxious, but because my mind was strangely quiet, too quiet, like the stillness right before a pressure front breaks open the sky. I lay awake on my couch with a blanket around my shoulders, watching the muted glow of the city beyond my apartment windows. Horizon Jet had stolen so many nights from me. Tonight, I stole one back. A little after 4 a.m, my phone lit up with the soft, pulsing glow of Skytrace's public tracker, one I'd synced years ago just in case I ever needed to watch operations remotely. Old habit? Paranoia? Survival instinct? Call it whatever you want. The graph showed the system beginning its scheduled pre-dawn refresh, the time when the routing matrix dissolves and restitches itself for the morning wave. Normally, my scripts handled this transition with grace-patching gaps, rerouting incomplete data, correcting malformed duty logs, and nursing Skytrace out of its groggy stupor like a cranky giant. But those scripts were now locked behind the credentials of a woman the company had decided was redundant. I got up, made coffee, and sat in front of the screen as the algorithm approached the tipping point. No shake in my hands, no hesitation, just the cool acceptance of inevitability. At 4:22, the first warning appeared: roster cache error backup sequence unavailable. I didn't touch my phone. I didn't need to. 30 seconds later, Flight 981 wrote anomaly, detected Flight 245. Crew validation failure, Flight 552. Destination mismatch 1 by 1. The system was misaligning itself like a child rearranging puzzle pieces by shape instead of picture. I leaned back in my chair. Skytrace wasn't sabotaged. Not by me. It was simply doing what it always did when its logic was amputated, fall apart. My phone buzzed violently. Jonah, I answered. If you tell me everything's fine, I'll know you're lying. I said. He exhaled shakily. Esme, we've got a problem. How bad the entire East Coast matrix won't load. The departure wave is stuck. We've got crews pinging mismatched aircraft, flights with no assigned pilots, and arrivals routing to gates that don't exist anymore. Skytrace is acting like it's 19 years old again. In the background, I heard shouting, the clatter of keyboards, a string of curses that probably violated FAA professionalism guidelines. Jonah whispered. Marina is in the OCC right now. Esme. She's crying. Why she tried to refresh the interface. It made the Denver hub vanish from the dashboard. I pinched the bridge of my nose. Did you call Cole? He's already here? He kicked a trash can. I smiled slightly. Efficient use of his skill set. Esme, what do we do? There it was. The question I knew would come, the question that always came. But this time, I had the clearest answer of my life. You do what you can manually. Jonah, do your best. Keep people safe. But the system won't stabilize without the scripts, and those scripts are tied to my profile. A long silence. A horrible, dawning silence. They didn't know. He whispered. No, I said softly. They didn't want to know. Before he could speak again, muffled yelling erupted on his end. A new voice panicked. Breathless shouted, "Ground stop alert! Chicago hub is locking out aircraft tags." My stomach tightened, not with guilt, but with recognition. Chicago was always the first domino. Its load was too heavy, its timing too precise. When Chicago failed, the entire airline felt it down to the bone. Jonah, I said, keeping my voice calm, steady, grounding him the way I always had. Listen to me carefully. I'm listening, he said, shaky but focused. Stay out of the system. Manual only. Don't let anyone push an override. They'll break it worse. He swallowed. Esme, are you coming in? I stared at my dark apartment, the coffee cooling in my hands, the freedom humming beneath my ribs. No, I said. Not unless they understand exactly what they broke. He didn't argue. He only whispered. Good luck. You too. I ended the call. Outside my window, the first faint glow of dawn edged over the horizon, at Horizon Jet headquarters. The morning shift was waking up to chaos, and I, for the first time in 14 years. I wasn't responsible for saving them, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty by sunrise. Someone would be begging me to come back. If you watch until the end, you will understand what everyone else missed. By 5 o'clock in the morning, Horizon Jet's headquarters looked less like an airline operations center and more like a medical drama where everyone realizes the patient is flatlining at the same time. I knew this because Jonah texted me a photo, a blurry, chaotic snapshot of the OCC, red errors flashing across the giant wall screens, 2 flight attendants crying in their uniforms, a manager holding a phone in each hand, yelling into both. Marina sitting on the floor. Mascara streaked down her cheeks, hugging her pastel tablet like it might resurrect the system. And Cole jaw clenched, hair disheveled, screaming at an IT specialist who looked 1 sentence away from quitting on the spot. It was beautiful in a tragic, predictable way. My phone vibrated again. This time, a call. Unknown number, but I knew exactly who it was. I let it ring twice before picking up. Esme. Cole's voice cracked like he hadn't slept because he hadn't. Skytrace is malfunctioning. Malfunctioning, I echoed. That's what you're calling it. It's not loading crew sync, he snapped. Planes can't get clearance without crew validation. Pilots don't know what flights they're assigned to. The departure board thinks every aircraft is simultaneously at Gate 7, and Denver disappeared. And the system says we have 3 planes taxiing to the same runway slot. He finished, breath shaking. We need you to come in. There it was. The moment I'd been waiting for. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply sipped my coffee. Cole, you fired me. He exhaled sharply. We can reverse that. I'm not interested. A beat of stunned silence, as if the idea of someone refusing him had never been part of his worldview. Then quietly, tightly, Esme. Please. The FAA just issued a preliminary cautionary alert. Ah, the FAA. The 3 letters that could make any airline executive's blood run cold. What kind of alert, I asked, knowing full well what kind. He swallowed. They're preparing a ground stop. There it was. The nuclear option. Ground stops didn't happen for small glitches. They happened when the entire operational backbone was compromised and every minute cost tens of thousands. Esme, Cole said again, desperation creeping into his voice. Just come in. Plug in your credentials or whatever. You can fix this. I let the silence stretch long enough for him to feel it. Cole, I said finally. I told you yesterday Skytrace is an ecosystem. You can't amputate the stabilizing logic and expect the system to walk. I know that now, he shouted, in the background. I heard the chaos intensify the beeping alarms, frantic typing, someone shouting about rerouting a Boston arrival that was minutes from fuel minimums. Then Marina's voice, high and brittle. Cole. The board is calling again. They said if we don't resolve this in 10 minutes, we're liable. That word traveled through the phone with the weight of a guillotine blade. Esme, he whispered, if you don't come in, the entire airline could shut down. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't soften it either. That sounds like a leadership problem. He inhaled sharply. You can't do this. I didn't do this. I corrected. You did. Another voice interrupted, older, deeper, steady in a way that silenced both of us. Esme, Elias Renford. Of course, the father finally stepping into the disaster his son created. I'm here too, he said, and I'm asking you for the sake of the employees, for the passengers to help us. The plea in his voice was real, the kind of weight only a founder could carry. It pulled at something inside me, but not enough to erase 14 years of being undervalued, ignored, overworked. Elias, I said quietly, your son made decisions without understanding the system, without respecting it. And now the system is simply revealing the truth. What will it take? Elias asked. Tell me what you want. Ah, there it was, the leverage they never realized I had. I stood, walked to the window, and watched the faint glow of dawn breaking over the city, over an airline that was bleeding from self-inflicted wounds. What did I want? Not revenge. Accountability. First, I said slowly, we talk about who's actually in charge. A long, heavy silence filled the line after those words left my mouth. Cole was breathing hard, like he'd sprinted to grab the phone. Elias exhaled slowly, the tired sound of a man bracing for a truth he'd hoped never to confront. Finally, Elias spoke. What exactly do you mean by that? Esme, I mean, I said, keeping my voice calm and dangerously even. I won't step foot in that building unless the decision-making authority is removed from people who don't understand the system they're controlling. You mean me? Cole cut in sharply. Yes, I said. I mean you, he sputtered, half choking on indignation. You're out of line. You don't get to dictate leadership. You're Cole. Elias's voice sliced through him. Stop talking. The shock in Cole's silence was almost audible. Elias continued, his tone shifting from weary father to the founder who once ran this airline with his bare hands and a clipboard. Esme, he said, I'll listen, but I need you to be specific. What do you want changed? I looked out the window. The sky was bleeding from indigo to pale gold, the kind of dawn that always made me think of early flights, early work, and early sacrifices. So many years spent keeping this airline alive, while the people at the top treated its heartbeat like background noise. I finally answered. First, Operations Authority returns to someone who understands Skytrace, not someone who wants to gamify the console with color palettes and mood boards. That is unfair. Marina suddenly shrieked from the background. I was trying to modernize the user experience, and you deleted an entire hub from the dashboard. Jonah's muffled voice snapped from somewhere nearby. I almost smiled. Elias cleared his throat. Continue. Esme. Second, I said. Effective immediately. All restructuring plans get frozen until the FAA investigation completes. Because trust me, they're investigating this. Cole swore under his breath. Elias didn't deny it. I kept going. Third, if you want me to restore the stabilizing scripts, I'm not returning as Senior Systems Flow Architect. That title means nothing. I want full operational autonomy over Skytrace and all dependent systems. You want my job? Cole spat. No. I said, I want the job you think you're doing. That finally shut him up. A door slammed on their end. Someone muttered. Papers rustled. Marina whimpered something about toxic environments. Then Elias spoke again. Steadier, firmer. If we agree to these conditions, will you come? Not yet, I said. There's one more thing. I let the quiet stretch long enough that everyone listening leaned into it. I want absolute protection for my team. Jonah, the night crew, every technician you threatened with layoffs, they stay. No retaliation, no restructuring targeting them. I won't stabilize a system just so you can replace them with consultants when the dust settles. The line went silent again. This time, longer. Because this wasn't about money. This wasn't about pride. This was about forcing HorizonJet to confront something they'd refused to acknowledge for years. They only functioned because the people they undervalued kept carrying the weight. Elias finally broke the silence. Done. He said, but I'll need to put it in writing. You do that. I replied. And once it's signed, he asked carefully, you'll fix this? Yes. I said, I'll bring the system back. A breath of relief washed through the speakers, his, Jonah's, even distant voices in the OCC. But I added, Elias froze. But what I'm not walking into that room alone, I said. Not after the way your son handled things. If I'm returning, I want the board present. All of them. Cameras on, mics on. Cole exploded. This is humiliating. She's not royalty. Dad, number Elias said sharply. She's the person keeping our aircraft from falling out of the sky. And then, quietly, Esme, give me 1 hour, I'll gather the board. 1 hour? I confirmed. I ended the call. Then I stood in my quiet apartment, watching the sunrise stretch across the city, feeling the shift, the unmistakable shift of an airline realizing exactly who held their future in her hands. And it wasn't the CEO's son or his fiancée. It was the woman they'd fired. The next hour moved like a pressure wave rolling across the city, while HorizonJet scrambled to gather its board and patch its reputation. I showered, changed, and tied my hair back with the quiet precision of someone preparing for a courtroom battle, not a shift at an airline. On the news, the ticker blared. HorizonJet faces major system outage, FAA issues, partial ground stop. They hadn't gone full shutdown yet, but they were close. One wrong move, one uncontrolled taxi, one mismatched crew assignment, and the FAA would pull the plug. At 6:23, Jonah texted, "They're all here, even the board chair. Elias looks like he aged 10 years overnight." Then Cole is pacing. Marina won't stop crying. The IT team is Googling things we don't want them Googling. I grabbed my keys. By the time I reached HorizonJet headquarters, the parking lot was packed executives, managers, crew members called in from home, FAA observers, even a police cruiser at the entrance just in case. Because when an airline collapses, people panic, people get angry, people sue, inside. I walked through the lobby as if I never left. Every employee I passed looked at me with a mixture of hope and terror, like I was the paramedic arriving at the scene moments before the patient slipped away. Jonah met me outside the boardroom. "You ready?" he whispered. "No," I replied honestly, "but I'm here." He pushed open the door. Inside sat the entire board of HorizonJet, the most powerful people I'd never been invited to meet. 20 eyes turned toward me, some embarrassed, some desperate, some furious. At the head of the table stood Elias. Cole sat stiffly beside him, jaw locked, cheeks pale. Marina hovered behind him, clutching her tablet with both hands like it might protect her from consequences. Elias gestured to an empty seat. Esme, he said, voice steady but heavily burdened. Thank you for coming. I didn't sit. I'll remain standing. I said, This won't take long. A murmur rippled across the table. Elias cleared his throat. Let's address this directly. Overnight, Skytrace suffered a catastrophic failure. We believe, based on internal review, that the system's stability depended on a series of legacy scripts tied to Miss Pierce's credentials. The board chairwoman, a sharp-eyed woman named Margot Halden, leaned forward. Is that true? Yes, I said simply. Did you remove them? She asked carefully. No, I replied. I consolidated them, legally, transparently, as per the 2014 Workflow IP clause in HorizonJet's own policy. Cole slammed his hands on the table. This is insane. You deliberately crippled us. I didn't flinch. I preserved the system. You removed the stabilizing element. The system responded. You could have warned us, he shouted. I did. I said, for 14 years. A dangerous hush fell over the room. Margot interlaced her fingers. Ms. Pierce, if we restore your access, can you reverse the damage? Yes, I said, in under an hour. A collective exhale filled the room. But, I continued. Cole groaned and dragged a hand down his face. Of course there's a but. Margot raised a hand. Let her speak. I held her gaze. I've already given my conditions to Elias. Operational autonomy, protection for my team, no interference from unqualified leadership. Cole scoffed loudly. You want control of the entire airline? No, I corrected. I want control of the system that keeps it alive. Margot turned to Elias. You agreed to this, I did, he said quietly, and I stand by it. The board whispered among themselves. Finally, Margot nodded. Then it's settled. Effective immediately. Esme Pierce is reinstated. Elevated to Director of Operational Systems Integrity. Reporting directly to the board, not to the Renford family. Cole's head snapped up. What, you've done enough damage? Cole, Margot said coldly. Sit down. For the first time since I'd met him. Cole obeyed. Elias turned to me. Esme, will you restore the system? I paused, not for drama, but for truth, because this moment wasn't about revenge. It was about recognition. I will, I said. But once this is done, I'm rewriting Skytrace from the ground up, and I won't tolerate interference. Understood, Elias said. Margot nodded. Then let's get to work. I finally stepped forward. Walking toward the console, they'd prepared a system waiting for the only person it recognized. As I placed my hand on the keyboard, the room held its breath. Skytrace flickered, paused, then seemed to listen. And for the first time since dawn, the beast began to settle. Skytrace always reacted to my presence like a half-feral creature, recognizing the only handler it trusted. As soon as I logged in, the error messages hesitated like the system was holding its breath. Then, a soft chime, the kind it only made when the root access reconnected to its stabilizing structure. Behind me, someone whispered, Holy hell! But I didn't look up. The beast wasn't calm yet. Jonah, I said, hands flying across the keyboard. Get me the raw feed from Chicago, Denver, and Raleigh. I need to see every corrupted thread. On it, he said, sliding into the station beside me like we'd rehearsed this 1,000 times, because we practically had. The board watched in tense silence as I tore through the broken system. The code was a disaster. A shredded tapestry of mismatched data tags, overlapping crew logs, and aircraft identifiers blinking in the wrong quadrants. Esme, Margot asked cautiously, can this be fixed? It is being fixed, I said without looking up. But you need to understand something. The system didn't fail. It followed the flawed logic left behind when my stabilizers were disconnected. Cole groaned loudly. So what? The entire collapse is somehow our fault, I typed faster. Yes, I said. Silence exploded across the room. But I didn't fill it. I didn't need to. I had a system to resurrect. Jonah, clear the looping crew verifications. They're duplicating pilots in the Raleigh hub. Done. Now feed me the standby roster. He nodded, swiveled, and pulled it up. I injected the first patch, letting my custom script rethread the missing logic into the routing matrix. Not a single consultant HorizonJet had hired in the past decade had ever understood the system well enough to even find these nodes. Cole watched, slack-jawed. Marina stared at the screen with the expression of someone seeing hieroglyphics for the first time. "What is she even doing?" she whispered. Jonah answered before I could. "She's stitching the system back into reality." I deployed the second patch. The wall of monitors flickered once, twice, then began to shift. Routes snapped into place. Duty clocks realigned. Aircraft identifiers rolled back into their proper gates, like sheep returning to a familiar shepherd. A gasp filled the room. Then applause quiet, disbelieving, almost reverent. "Don't applaud yet," I said. "We're halfway. Next. The Chicago hub. The most delicate, most overloaded, most temperamental node in the entire network. Jonah, activate the fallback buffer I wrote last winter." He blinked. "The one you told me never to touch unless the world was ending." I nodded. "It ended this morning." He executed it, and for a moment, just one heartbeat, Skytrace went completely still. No alarms, no errors, no blinking lights, just stillness. Then, whump. Every display refreshed, every hub resynced, every delay recalculated itself based on real data instead of corrupted fragments. The map of the U.S. glowed with green and yellow traffic flows. Not perfect, not ideal, but alive. Jonah exhaled so hard he nearly doubled over. Marina burst into tearful relief. Cole's shoulders sagged, not in gratitude, but in humiliation. Margot stepped forward. "Is it stable enough?" I said. "Now we coordinate manually to smooth out the rest." Elias covered his face with both hands, exhaustion, relief, regret, all folding into one long exhale. "Esme," he said quietly, "you just saved us." I logged the final protocol, fingers finally slowing. "I didn't save you," I corrected. "I stabilized the system. Whether HorizonJet survives, that depends on what you do next." The room went silent again, the weight of responsibility dropping on every shoulder except mine, because for the first time in 14 years, the burden wasn't mine anymore. Once Skytrace steadied itself, the room finally exhaled. Not in triumph, no one dared celebrate yet, but in the shaky, exhausted way people breathe after narrowly avoiding a collision they never saw coming. I leaned back for the first time in an hour. My fingers ached, my shoulders felt like stone, but the system was alive again, stabilized, conscious, listening. Margot folded her arms. "We owe you more than an apology, Ms. Pierce?" Cole huffed, slumping into his chair like a sulking child sent to detention. Marina wiped under her eyes, trying to salvage what was left of her mascara. But I didn't look at them. They weren't the ones who mattered now. "I'll need the rest of the day to finish smoothing out the dependencies," I said. "But the backbone is restored." Jonah nodded vigorously beside me. "She saved the entire East Coast. Chicago's reruns are stabilizing. Denver's back online. Raleigh, too." Then softer. We were minutes from a global reroute. Minutes. People had no idea how tightly wound the aviation world was, how fragile the choreography could be. One cracked thread, and everything unraveled. Elias approached me slowly, his steps heavy but measured. "Esme, I don't know what to say." "Then start with accountability." I replied. "You gave authority to someone who wasn't ready, and your employees suffered for it." His jaw clenched. Shame flickered behind his eyes. "I know," he said quietly. "And I take responsibility," Cole snapped. "Dad?" "You can't just sit," Elias ordered, and for the first time since I'd known him, Cole sat without a word. I turned back to the system. "There's one more thing." Margot stepped closer. Go on. I need full access to the infrastructure logs the consultants altered. They injected changes without understanding the architecture. If those aren't reversed properly, we'll be chasing corrupted threads for months. Consider it done, she said immediately. And I need the authority to build a new sandbox environment. I added, separate from Skytrace. If we're modernizing, we start clean, not patching over incompetence. You'll have everything you need, Margot replied. But it was Jonah's voice, quiet and choked. That hit deeper. Esme, thank you for not letting this place fall apart. I met his eyes. I didn't do it for Horizon Jet, I said softly. I did it for the people who keep it alive. Behind us. Cole scoffed under his breath. This is ridiculous. She's treating us like children. I turned slowly, letting my gaze settle on him. You ignored warnings, mishandled critical systems, dismissed expertise. If Skytrace treated you the way you treated your staff, this airline would already be in the ground. Marina flinched. Jonah bit back a grin. Even Margot raised an eyebrow. Elias exhaled. Esme, what happens now? I looked down at the console at the creature I'd spent half my life keeping alive. Now I said, straightening. Now we rebuild. Properly, transparently, competently. And you'll lead the rebuild, Margot asked. Yes, I said, but only under the conditions we agreed. Elias nodded. Done. I shut down my console. The system hummed softly, no alarms, no shrieks, just steady, controlled breathing, for the first time in 14 years. I said quietly, Skytrace doesn't terrify me, but what came next still might. By early afternoon, Skytrace had steadied itself like a wounded creature, finally finding its breath. The FAA lifted the partial ground stop. Flights began moving again carefully at first, then with growing confidence as the patched logic spread through the system like clean blood replacing poison. I stayed in the OCC until every major hub transitioned from red to yellow, then back to green. Only when the final departure board aligned did I let myself step away. From the mezzanine overlooking the terminals, I watched a Horizon Jet Airbus ease back from Gate 17. No mismatched crew tags, no corrupted routing, no alarms screaming through the console, just a clean, quiet pushback, a plane trusting the system again. Jonah joined me, hands in his pockets. You saved all of us today, he said softly. No, I replied. I saved the system. The airline decides what it does with that gift. He nodded. And for a moment, we simply watched another aircraft join the taxiway, two tired workers, finally seeing the result of the chaos we clawed our way through. Behind us. Footsteps echoed. Elias approached, looking older than he had yesterday, but steadier, like someone who had finally regained control of a ship drifting toward disaster. It's done, he said. The board has reassigned Cole to a non-operational division, permanently, and Marina, she'll no longer be with Horizon Jet. I nodded once, no satisfaction, no gloating, just the quiet confirmation that accountability had finally found its target. Elias extended his hand. Esme, thank you, for the system, for the company, and for forcing us to face the truth. I shook his hand. Just make sure it doesn't slip back into the wrong hands again. We won't, he promised. I wasn't doing this for Horizon Jet's legacy. I was doing it for the people who'd kept the airline alive long before this crisis. Jonah, the night crew, the dispatchers who never got credit, the mechanics who worked through storms, the schedulers who kept everything moving despite the chaos above them. As Elias walked away, Jonah looked at me sideways. So, now what I watched another plane lift off clean, steady, balanced. Now, I said, we rebuild the right way. Skytrace hummed softly through the tracking app in my pocket. Perfectly synced, perfectly stable, finally understood, and for the first time since this nightmare began. I felt like the future belonged to someone who earned it. Looking back, I realized the real lesson wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming the space where my worth was ignored for too long. If you've ever been pushed aside, I hope my story reminds you that clarity is a kind of power too. How are you feeling after hearing this? And where are you listening from tonight if this story stayed with you? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Feel free to like, share, and subscribe. Your support keeps these stories alive. 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 These stories alive.